Hi. Alan, you're not there. And?
It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here, too. It's good to have you, too, Steve. Glad
Thanks.
to meet you at last.
Yes.
Okay, we've got that
We need
underway.
to say we're in Hopewell, Alabama.
We're in Hopewell, Alabama.
At
on,
the Doyle Lawrence
yes.
estate.
Doyle and Alice Lawrence have made this what it is. Just look at it. It's 80 acres. There's a new artifact on the horizon over there. You see that water tank? They're trying to make this into an industrial park out here. But well, maybe that means that the value of the property will go up. Anyway, there are the cows. There's Cheryl. There are two herds. That's the one on that side, and there's another over on the other side. And my house is just down yonder.
About the pond.
The pond is full of fish, and we fish a lot and eat the fish out of it. And fry that up and have hush puppies and coleslaw and fried brim. Or fried, what's the other one? Bass. And there's another one, but I can't remember. My mouth is getting dry, that means I'm nervous.
You live here or visit here?
Well, I come every once in a while when I can for the summer. This is the third time I've done it, and I enjoy it a lot, up to a point. And I stay for 3 or 4 months and work with my dad around the house, around the farm. And we've been painting. All of this is new. Everything used to be white. Now it's pink. Guess who chose that color?
They just wanted to do white again.
They wanted to, of course they wanted to do white again. Who wouldn't?
Well,
And now I know why. I drive around and all the middle class houses around here have color on them. And our kind of people have white. But anyway, so now it's pink.
But pink is supposed to be better for your complexion.
Certainly, I said the reflection
That's right.
on me
And,
would
yeah.
be better.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're taking this picture at this hour, because this hour is also good for me.
Oh, it flatters you, no question about
I know that. It was well calculated. Even looks good with the gray. Pink and gray was very big in 1955,
Well,
6.
yeah. That's right. Actually, when early high school. Because I remember it being very big when I was in Vermont.
Oh.
And I didn't move to Nashville until I was a junior.
Oh, and your ancestral Vermont. Where your grandfather or great-grandfather?
Nobody.
Somebody ran with Eugene V. Debs, or somebody was a socialist.
Oh,
That was
my father's father.
Yeah, it was a socialist.
What a pull. My father's father, Adolph Hirschberg, worked on a socialist newspaper free of charge for
I remembered some kind
Very
of
idealistic, yeah.
Association with Eugene V. Debs. Was it Eugene V? Eugene Debs.
Now, see, I don't
B.
know the association, but
My daughter wrote a paper on it, that's why I know.
That's right. How long have you been in Colombia?
In Colombia, I have been there since 1963, January. So that's a long time, except for 10 years in New York. I
Yeah.
spent 10 years in New York. I left, and although I continued going back to Colombia, I spent most of those 10 years in New York, and spent less and less time in Colombia. And I went back, 5 years ago, and decided, this is it. I'm staying in New York. This is crazy. Why am I keeping that apartment there and furniture and everything else? And I was going to sell my furniture and close the apartment and really be in New York, where I owned an apartment. Well, I decided just the opposite. And I went back to New York and sold the apartment in New York, sold all the furniture in New York, and moved back to Colombia, where my apartment was nicer and life is nicer.
That was
Really?
5 years ago.
That was 5. Yeah, it must have been 5 years. Well, 6 years ago that I made the decision. Then it took me a while to sell the apartment in New York. I hit the crest of the wave in New York when real estate was absolutely insane. I mean, these hot shots
Yeah.
from Wall Street,
Oh,
young
Yeah.
lawyers and everything would pay
Yeah.
anything to live in Greenwich Village,
Right.
Yeah.
where I had this apartment. I mean, paper walls like every place in this country, but it was an apartment in Greenwich Village.
You bet.
And they paid, I thought, insane money. I mean, it was 6 times more than I paid, and I thought I paid a lot. I thought it was outrageous, because when I was growing up, you know, a nice little house like this, you know,
Yeah.
your basic 3-bedroom and 3-bath and den and living room and dining room and your front living room that no one should go into, except when somebody dies or gets married. And so that used to be what I call the $35,000 house, like one word,
Yeah.
$35,000 house.
Right.
Oh, they got a $35,000 house. Hey, did you see those people over there? They built a $35,000 house. And it was this one word, $35,000 house. And that's all the time that I was in high school. I remember, oh, they got a $35,000 house. And my aunt and uncle built a $35,000 house. And so when I got an apartment for $35,000 in New York, I thought that was absolutely outrageous. I mean, that was a lot of money. Who was going to, I mean, my God. And it just had 1 bedroom. Had a large living room though, and very high ceiling. It was an old building.
And so I'm calculating. So you sold it for about 200,000.
Yeah, around that neighborhood, yes. Can you imagine? Isn't that insane? My next door neighbors, 4 months later, sold theirs for 250,000. And after that, though, it crashed.
Yeah.
And nobody could sell an apartment in that building. There were no hot shots on Wall Street making lots of money. And this guy was just out of college. His mother was paying for the apartment. That much money. So I decided to take that much money
Right.
and put it into something and go and live in Columbia and write, which is what I had wanted to do. I mean, I had already written a few books, but it had been very hard. And when I say books, I do not mean paperbacks at your supermarket or anything that would be made into a movie.
Well, give us some titles.
Oh, you want titles? There's one called Fun with English. That's on 6 levels from kindergarten, and it's really great for kiddies learning English. It's published in Mexico by McGraw-Hill. Then for Oxford University Press, I did American Streamlined English. And that was considered, you know,
A classic?
a really, I mean, you know, it was such a good thing I had to do one better. And I've done a few other minor works. One was called Dear Abby, but she wouldn't let me use the title. And what I did was I took letters to her and her answers, but then I had exercises in between for the students to try to figure out what would they do and try to analyze the situation. And so it was really picked up from her, but I didn't feel guilty because she picked it up from other people, right?
Right.
She got the letters, that was the main part, the letter, which was, they're all so incredible. And so, but she wouldn't let me call the book Dear Abby. So I had to call it Reply Requested. Another classic. Live in memory, yes.
Now, I can see that in the supermarket.
Oh, yeah.
Published by whom?
But it has, this is published by Addison Wesley, which is now owned by Longmans, but then everybody's owned by somebody nowadays. So my new book, and this is the big one. This is in Hollywood terms, the mega bucks. I mean, they have put so much money into this, I can't believe it. And it's called The English Advantage. You've heard of the
Right.
American Express Advantage.
Right. The English
Right.
advantage. Huh.
The English Advantage. And they made a video to go with each level. Each video was $250,000.
Wow.
And they spent money on the artwork and everything. I couldn't believe how
Yeah.
much money they spent on it. And so it's this big deal.
Right, right.
And this is published by Newbery House, which at the time that I signed with them was a small independent publisher in Newburyport, Massachusetts. It was then scarfed up by Harper and Row. But then Harper and Row, which had bought it for $3 million, sold it for $18 million a month ago to the Thompson Group. All these Brits do is just change hands because Harper and Row was bought by Murdoch. Murdoch needed cash, and so he sold Newbery House. So now we're part of the Thompson Group.
Is that Thompson Electronics? Okay.
I don't know. Before I worked for Lytton, which was submarines and computers and microwave ovens, and we were the poor end, the books, the tax write-off. And so they just throw these things around. I mean, and they pass them back and forth. It's like being in a poker game. And so he got $18 million for this company. He paid $3 million for it 4 years ago. And of course, the big asset is my book. I say my book. I shouldn't say that. There are three of us, three authors.
Oh.
Co-authors. They wrote the major part of it.
Are you
I must
marketing
admit,
mostly?
mostly everything that I did, they rejected. But I got some things in. I got a lot of things. Well, anyway, it's my book. Too.
Now this isn't the old Flan Norton.
Well, Flam is one of the
Flam, that's right.
Flam is one of the co-authors.
It's not a pudding. It's
And
Flam.
Richard Yorkey, who's a person I used to ghostwrite for. I did several of his books. He is co-author on this, and this is his legacy. He's quite old, and this is his legacy. This book, he did the Teacher's Guide, which is the best teacher's guide in the world.
And this is used for Spanish speaking.
Oh no, it's all over the world. We're going to Japan in November, I think. Well, I think Jackie's going to go to Japan. I'm going to Egypt. It's going to be used all over the world. So Latin America is where I'm pushing it because I live there. And so I'm down there and traveling around, and they have me go here and go there and be author.
Do you have signing parties?
There's only been one time that people asked me for my autograph in the book, and that was the very first presentation that I did of the book in Buenos Aires. And I knew it was good. It was so good. I couldn't believe it. I was just hitting everything. They were laughing. It was all, and at the end, they stood up and applauded this presentation.
Oh.
And then everybody pushed around me, asking me for my autograph. I felt wonderful. I just put an X. You're supposed to be some thick, right? I can't really write. But I put it by my name on the book.
You couldn't recognize your name.
I said, or you can write in any dedication and I'll put the X. Because of course you want to make it personal. Right?
Yeah.
Good luck to Professor who? How do you spell it? Don't tell me. So after all these years, I'm schlepping books around still.
Yeah.
I thought I had quit that.
Well, you had thought, when I talked to you 11 years ago, you didn't have your name on a book at that point.
No,
You
I
were
had.
trying to sell like a piece, have a piece of the royalties for ghostwriting.
Yes. Well, I have about, I don't know, 120 books that I get a piece of because of different things that I've done. Some of them I thought of the title.
Yeah.
Get this one. Hear America Speak.
I love it. I love it.
That was a good one. I got that just for the title. I have got part of the royalty on that. Just for that title. That was Hear America Speak. USIA scarfed that up right away. Boy,
Right.
they pushed that all over the place. That's with tapes and everything. Oops.
Oh, are those the ones where you can go through a section of the country and you stick a tape in your car and it tells you about that area?
No.
I don't know. I mean, I just knew that the book. I knew that the book was this oral thing. And they said we've got a real title problem, and I said oral. I said okay, Hear America Speak, and they said we love it, and that's all the work I did.
It's not very different from Teen Towers Productions,
No,
is
it
it?
isn't. Remember when we got Steve Courtney out? Who did we put in? I don't know. No, I mean,
Oh,
it's
I
so
think,
that
was that when Alan Jr. was elected?
maybe it was when Alan was elected.
Became governor
Governor,
of Teen Town.
yes.
Right.
Yes.
That was right after you installed me as president of the Thespian Club, unbeknownst to most members of the club. Although I had a fairly large role as the second dead woman in our town the year,
You
that
were
year.
good.
Well, I had a shiny patent belt, which caught the light, and so everyone said, "Oh, I saw you."
Listen, every time I see that play, I always think of you.
That's right.
And I always think of how good they are. And whatever production I've ever seen, I keep thinking, my God, they're so good. I was so awful. You know, I look
No,
at the
you
pictures and,
weren't.
throwing, I never knew how to throw a baseball. And I had to throw one in the air and catch it. I mean, I couldn't catch even an imaginary ball.
That was Spalding Gray's greatest role. He played the narrator in our
That
town.
was- that was
I was
Leland.
George.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I was George.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
thought
was
you were the
George.
stage
No, I
manager.
had to fall crying on the grave
Oh,
of Chandler,
oh
who
your
was
dream.
sitting over next to you. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, but she was sitting over there. I was just on her grave.
I didn't remember that you were George.
I was George and she was Emily.
remember
Jack
she was
Horton
Emily.
was the stage manager.
Who's he?
I don't know. He's probably gone on to a great career.
Yeah.
And
He had talent.
Changed his name to Tommy Toon.
Tony Tennell was my mother.
okay, Tony.
All right.
Tony Tennell, who Tennille
Yeah.
today they say
Tony
Tennille.
Tennell claims she's about 42 years old
Oh,
today.
really? Well, don't show her this tape. She's 45 if I may.
That's right.
No, she really became successful, and she used to play in the band. I mean, she sang with the band, the Lanier Poets, and that was the dance band. And the dance band was led by Bobby Betcher.
Right.
Bobby Betcher wrote a great book, which I think no one read. I got it at, what's the discount store in New York? Anyway, one of those, for like $1.98.
Yeah.
It's called Gifts of Deceit. And it was about the Korean CIA. He had been he was the consul, the lawyer for the Senate investigation of the Korean CIA, and that guy who had given gifts to people in Congress and everything. Remember that scandal?
Sherman
It's all the
Adams.
Korean
Sherman
water
Ad-
grades.
Sherman
water
Sherman
grades.
Adams by Kuna Colt.
No, Sherman Adams, that's Eisenhower. No, I'm talking about later than that. Wasn't his name?
Bobby would have graduated from high school in '58, so he
Yes.
would have been a lawyer, say, 7 years later.
Yeah, but he
65.
went on to other things.
Yeah.
And
Johnson
and
Kennedy.
Anyway, he was the lawyer for this committee. And anyway, I saw him when I was in New York. He was sitting at a restaurant, and it was called Chez Suzette.
Yeah.
And I saw this guy over there, and he looked very pale. He looked like Bobby when he was made up to be my father, right? Or to be Emily's
Yeah.
father. I don't remember whose father he was.
Yeah.
But anyway, when he was made up to be, that's exactly how he looked. And he was pale and kind of wrinkled and everything. And I went over to him and I said, Bobby, and he looked up at me and he said, Leland? And so we, said hello and all of that. And not many days later, he was dead.
Hmm.
They say he committed suicide. I don't believe it. I think they pushed him. from the roof of his building, the Korean CIA. I think they
Wow.
killed him.
Because when you saw him, you didn't find him particularly depressed or
No, although Sally horse person? Jones,
right.
who went on to raise the prize. Yeah. She was more in touch with him, and they did think he was depressed. I think he was depressed because he had a real situation.
Yeah.
And that was he had done all this investigation and nothing really had happened to the bad guys. And so it was like 1980, I'll say that, just pulling it. And I saw an article in the New York Times, and he had apparently, they said, fallen from the roof of his building on the Upper West Side. I was sure he was pushed. Later they said that he jumped and that he committed suicide. The book would be the kind of thing that they would go for.
Right.
And I think that in the real world, people do get killed.
Right.
And I think Bobby was one who got killed by the Korean CIA. And I don't show this.
Right.
Or they'll be after me.
Yeah.
My God, that'll make enough CIAs after me.
We'll have to be real careful about this.
Is it winding up time? Oh, great.
No, we're getting a low battery reading.
Oh, low battery reading.
So you got about 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, 10 to 15 minutes.
Go ahead. We'll just keep going.
My whole life
If the
was
battery
about
runs
that.
out, hey, if the battery runs out, it runs out.
We're just reminiscing.
Okay, we'll just keep going.
Yes.
He is in so much trouble. All battery, no videotape. And this is a very organized person. I
Hey.
think we are seeing the most
Don't waste valuable tape talking about my problems. We can talk about my problems anytime.
Which side of the beard are you getting? I really took a gap out of my beard
Yeah,
the other day.
yeah. Well, just no.
This is okay.
The side
Yeah.
view and the front view is fine.
Yeah, double chin.
Yeah, but just the more you look at the camera, the more I'll look at
Yeah,
you.
the better.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Get my head down. You can't see the 222 pounds.
No, I'm keeping a tight face shot.
220.
You don't look 222. You dress very well.
A master of disguise.
Could you give me the name of your tailor?
And I'm not even wearing black.
That's right. Well, you knew we'd suspect something arriving on a summer evening.
This girdle is so hot.
Sorry.
Oh, God, so hot.
I don't want to waste it. My mother was telling me this favorite family joke. Oh, I need to tell it on waste the video because I want to hear what you had to say. But it was so funny I was telling her about the story about the My Fair Lady tickets. Stephen was 10 years old and lived in upstate New York, and his dad and mom had ordered My Fair Lady tickets
A year
a
ahead
year
of time.
They had wonderful tickets in the orchestra.
Oh.
Stephen and his mother were out
It was the
shopping.
last, and it turned out to be the last week that Julie Andrews was in the play. She was going to step down.
Stephen and his mother had been out shopping.
My
and-
father who was a small town family practitioner, we went to New York because he was at some meeting. Yeah, so he was at a professional meeting during the day.
He had one ticket. Stephen and his mother had the other two. Stephen and his mother got there. They were seated. Dr. Adler wasn't there. The curtain was about ready to rise, and all of a sudden this perfect stranger walks in and sits down on the ticket and sits down on the seat and says, "Your husband said to tell you he'll meet you afterwards at such and such a place." And what had happened was that Dr. Adler had been offered an amount of money for the ticket he just couldn't
I mean, this guy
refuse.
offered him like a couple $100 for the ticket. He said, "To hell with that."
Julie Andrews.
Yeah, we'll see you later. Yeah.
But that reminded my mother of the story about the people who had the tickets for South. This is a fictional story. The tickets for South Pacific, and they're sitting there and they realize that the lady next to them has a vacant seat, and they said, it's unbelievable that someone wouldn't come to show this hot a ticket. And the woman said, well, that was for my husband, but he died. And they said, well how sad though that you couldn't have gotten a friend or someone to come. And she said, do you know this? They were all at the funeral. Columbia is being the author and going around and promoting.
Oh, I have another life. That is the life of the president.
Of Columbia.
Yeah, no.
No, that's
Not
too
yet.
dangerous a position to be in. No, the president of the Colombian Association of Teachers of English, which I was founder and president of 20 years ago, and more than 20 years ago. But they had fallen on hard times, so I decided that I would go back. They asked me, and so I became president of that, and so that keeps me busy. I do a lot of traveling, and I've gotten loans. Of course, I pay for it. They can't pay for anything. They're absolutely broke. But I've gotten money for them. I've done fundraising and things like that to help the Colombian Association of Teachers of English. And let's see, what else do I do? Oh, well, I administer my apartment, which is no small feat. I have a maid who is blind and insane. And I
But
have,
it's hard to let good help go, right?
really, I mean, she's so loyal, so loyal, and I mean, you know, she would not steal from me, which is a lot to be said in
Yeah.
Colombia, and because maids, as a matter of course, steal. I mean, you know that. You know when you're out of tuna, you go in the maid's room and you take back a can that she's stolen from you, and that she's going to take home to her children. You go in, you take the can, you say, "I'll pay you back later." And I also have a messenger who does, you know, odd jobs and errands and things like that, because in Colombia you can't pay your bills by mail. You have to go and stand in the line.
Oh, really? You can't pay like electricity bills?
No, nothing.
Utility.
Like that.
Wow.
Phone bills, everything. You go and you stand in line and pay it. So I pay somebody to go and stand in line.
Of course.
Because I know at one point, I'm sure that you weren't getting your mail, but I hadn't heard from you for quite a while. And I called your mother, and she said that because I was afraid you might be missing the annual Christmas cards and missing some particular critical point in the children's growth. And I had already sent a very nasty note to some friends in California who weren't corresponding, saying that the kids are cute now, but if I don't hear from you soon, you won't get off the list until they're through adolescence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted to spare you.
Yeah,
that.
we have
And your mother said that you actually were having trouble with your mail being stolen if it went to your apartment.
Well, that's-
and that you needed to use the P.O. box.
Yeah, that's true. Well, things get stolen everywhere. I mean, it's a poor country, very poor.
And it's not just an excuse for
No.
not
I mean,
corresponding.
things get stolen all the time, and especially mail.
Well, I know my daughter was active in Amnesty International, and they would write letters, and they were told not to use a postage meter for everything, because in poor countries, people would steal the stamps. And so that's when I started running things through the postage meter, usually, or using a very dull stamp. But
Have you seen my teeth? Remember, I told you in my Christmas card that I didn't have a family to talk about, but
Right.
I'd had a lot of dental work done.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Is there a lot of gold?
Is it gold?
What do you think?
I can't.
Is that copper?
Yeah.
Would you put copper in your
Oh
mouth?
my gosh. You're
Hey,
lucky
all
that you're not
right.
Jewish.
Why? I've always thought it was unlucky that I wasn't Jewish. Ever since I lived in New York, I always wanted to be Jewish. God, if you would be born that way, God.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have been so novel.
And I wouldn't have been so dumb.
When I was a resident radiologist at Stanford, all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I had dental insurance. And I went to the woman who sort of overseed the insurance and benefits policy, and I said, listen, I'm having a little trouble with my teeth. Because I talked to my dentist, and he said, now you got insurance, why don't we rip out all the amalgam and put in gold? And so she just cut me short, and she said, about how much money do you think this is going to cost, Steve? And I said, about $600. And she said, I'll put it through the carrier.
Well, in Colombia, it's much cheaper. I mean, it's the labor. You know, the labor is the big cost. Making all those little dents. sandblasting it so
That's
it's
a
not too
cute-
shiny.
I read in the paper that the Medellin is dead and Cali is now the drug capital.
Cali, yes. Well, I mean, we always knew that. I mean, everybody was going after Medellin because they were violent, and they were violent. They really were violent.
Yeah.
And now they've turned themselves in. They're all in prison.
Tough prison.
The mother cooking, right?
Well, but I don't. This priest who was the intermediary for the whole thing, and he's a big man. He has a program called The Minute for God. After the news every night, he comes on and he has this homily and the Minute for God. And excuse me, he's the one who was called up and he came back and he said, Pablo, speaking of Pablo Escobar, the murderer. You're not going to show this anywhere, are you?
No.
The assassin of Medellin, the man who's killed at least 500 people, said Pablo is a good man.
Yeah.
Pablo is a good man. And
you
he
knew
has a
then that
house
it-
that
right.
is super clean. That was his word. His house is super clean.
Right, right.
I thought, my God, with 500 servants, who wouldn't have a super clean house?
That's right.
Even with a blind maid, I could, if I had backup.
500 blind maids could
You
do
know,
it.
Really? Yeah, even blind, they could just sniff the dust. That's probably all they have to do at Pablo's house anyway. They
Just sniff it
off the
clean,
table.
yeah.
Sniff it clean.
Well, is the family of this priest now enjoying chateau life in Switzerland? Is
The
there
priest's brother was kidnapped, in fact, like a year ago. Well, everybody's been kidnapped. Even a friend of mine was kidnapped.
Oui.
It's been bad. I mean,
what kind?
it was bad.
I mean,
how does
The
it
drug
interfere-
war was bad.
How does it interfere with
Does,
like
yeah,
your daily life?
does that
My
yeah,
daily
does that
life-
enter the daily life in Bogota?
Well, yes. It meant you were more careful. You watched the places that you went. There were certain targets that everybody said, "Oh my God, they're blowing up all the banks," so nobody went to a bank. You only sent your messenger to the bank. He can go and cash the check. I mean, who is he? I mean, after all. And if he'll take a salary to go and do it, no. I mean, he reads the papers too. He hears the news. I mean, if he'll go and do it, well, then you pay him to go to the bank for you. Certain places you stayed away from, and for a while, I would never leave my house unless there was a taxi waiting at the door. And I would just go straight into the cab and off to where I was going, come back in the cab and into my house. But it was bad. I mean, you'd be sitting with friends at dinner and bomb. You'd hear one. You'd say, I wonder where that was.
Wow.
Everybody hit the floor. Because you never know if it was close enough, glass shards would go flying through the air. A friend of mine, very good friend of mine, only 5 blocks away from my house, was very near a bomb and glass shards all through the air. But he had hit the floor. He had the training. I won't say what he belongs to. But he had the training. I didn't know to do that. I was still trying to stick saran wrap on my windows, thinking that would help. Wax paper, I mean, anything. Saran wrap in Colombia is a whole new, remember the world's oldest man?
Yes. Yeah,
Remember
Mel
that?
Brooks.
Mel Brooks,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
and that whole thing, and he said, what's the greatest thing? And he says, yeah, no, well, girls. And what was the next best thing? He says, saran wrap. The greatest invention in history. Well, we have it in Colombia, but it takes 7 people to do it. I mean, talk about putting in a light bulb. 2 people have to pull it out. 2 people have to hold the ends of the box. Another person tears, and another person is there to grab this corner, and another to grab this corner, and then you try to get it around the food before the whole thing goes in. I mean, talk about cling.
Well, my mother said she doesn't like saran wrap. We were talking about this yesterday. She likes Reynolds plastic wrap, which to all appearances looks like saran wrap.
But-
But you don't need 7 people. I
Well,
bet
but-
you and the maid could do it.
Well, but I mean, no, but we can't get that, and I've got to live on the local economy,
Well,
except
can't
for certain
If you
luxuries.
were, do you think they think you were building plastic or something? If you were to go back home
With a suitcase
with
full
a
of
crate of Reynolds plastic, right?
Do you know how many things I always carry back? I carry back sun-dried tomatoes, pine nuts. I carry back extra virgin olive oil. I carry back balsamic vinegar. I carry back. Oh, the list is endless. I have a list every time I go.
Basil?
No, that I get locally, but they always let it come to the flour, and it's not nearly as pungent. I'm out there plucking the flowers out every day, really, pinching them out in the middle. But really, I mean, there are so many things that are missing, you know, and so you have to go to the black market. That always makes me feel guilty, you know. Black market, ever since World War
Can't
II,
you
it's
send the
always
messenger,
sounded so
or
bad.
does he not have good enough
Oh, he
eye?
wouldn't have. Oh, he wouldn't know what to take, and he wouldn't know the price.
Yeah.
I mean, just, you know, they would sucker him in.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah.
Bring me back just any old olive oil. I mean, you know, we're not talking about extra virgin. I mean, we're talking about olive oil. They don't bring back car grease. I mean, they do it. They do it. They fill olive oil cans with other things that you have to squeeze and you have to listen all around, make sure there's no little hiss from a hypodermic that's going through. No, it's everything. You gotta be on your toes in a third world country.
So actually, Greenwich Village was good preparation to moving to a
Oh,
third world country.
Absolutely. Well, I had lived in a third world country before I went to Greenwich Village, and that was good preparation for Greenwich
Yeah.
Village. I mean, when the lights went out in New York for over 24 hours, my friend
You were home. Yeah.
and it went out at night, you know, and,
Yeah.
and there was no water
Yeah.
because all the buildings have pumps. Every building over 2 or 3 stories high has a pump.
Really? I
We
thought
didn't
they
know-
had
we didn't
water
know that.
towers on their.
No, I mean, you know, apartment buildings, they don't have anything on top. And we thought that, you know, water was water.
Yeah.
There was no water, and you only had a radio by battery and everything. Well, we were perfectly prepared.
Right, right.
Having lived in Columbia,
Yeah.
I went across to the park where there was a fountain. I
Right.
filled my bucket and went back to my apartment so I could flush my john. I mean, everybody else said, "Oh my God, I never would have thought of that." And I said, "Well, you've never lived where you had to think about it." Our electricity goes off all the time, right? And the water goes. I mean, the water goes. The first 2 years that I was in the Peace Corps, we didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
The first 2 years I was in the Peace Corps, I was in a town where there was no water, except between 5 and 6 in the morning. There was a drizzle. And so I would get up sometime before 6, collect a pot full of drizzle, and heat it and wash one part of my body. And the next day I
Money
would
was-
wash another part. You know. I never did both armpits the same day. But that was Peace Corps. I mean, you know, and there was no, and there's still no water in that town. And that's a university town, and it's a population bigger than Montgomery.
Yeah.
And they
Wow.
put up with that. And, well,
They have no choice,
it's
do they?
hard to talk about what a third, because I thought when I went that it was going to be romantic and
Mhm.
horse-drawn carriages and things like that. But what it is they have everything we have, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work, or it works sometimes, and when you need it, it doesn't work. I mean, you go to pick
Yeah.
up the phone, you just dial. Sometimes you hold, I see Americans do that. They hold the receiver and they dial, because they know that there's a dial tone.
Right, right.
Yeah.
We have to wait. And sometimes I say to my maid, "Here, you can at least do this."
Yeah.
And she sits and listens for the dial tone. So about an hour later, she'll say, "Dial tone." I said, "Dial 2." And she'll start, and then I'll finish the number. She can't find the 2. Every number in Bogota begins with 2.
So you could put like one of those little dialers, just
Yes,
stick it in the thing,
stick it.
and just have her.
Yes.
Rotate it.
Well, I always have her finger. I said, "Dial 2." And she dials 2, and then, you know,
Oh, you
starts
put
on
her
it.
finger in there before you have her listen.
Yes,
I see.
and then she got the finger in, she's listening to the dial tone. And I'm up doing anything else, you know, you wait for dial tone.
Right, right.
And it literally takes an hour sometimes.
Or it can take, you know, nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you pick it
Yeah.
up and there's a dial tone, and you
Yeah.
say, "Oh my God." But you always listen for it. You
Yeah.
know, you wouldn't start the dial before you check.
Yeah.
Because if you start to dial before you check, then you're really screwed up.
Yeah.
You may be dialing overseas.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
You started with some weird number in the
Yeah.
middle of the number. So there you are, third world. What else? Oh, well, I went to the Peace Corps. We didn't talk about that.
There was something. I remember you telling me that. As long as we now can't show this tape to anyone that doesn't have a high security clearance. There was something about you're making the headlines of the Alabama paper.
Oh, Lord.
You and Michigan.
Oh, I don't care. I think they're gone. I mean, I think things are different now. I came back after the Peace Corps and I got involved in things here because, of course, how could I not? And even when I was at Georgetown, I was a member of the Student Committee to Aid Student Victims of Discrimination, or something like that. And so I was teaching school at Maxwell Elementary.
Maxwell Elementary.
And at the Air University. In the morning I was at Maxwell Elementary teaching Spanish, and in the afternoon I was at Maxwell at the Air University teaching Spanish.
Oh, Spanish.
Spanish. And so I got involved. I had an apartment downtown, and I got involved. And suddenly my car was crashed. I mean, like, I was driving along and suddenly it was just smashed up, and I was in the, and
Wow.
I went to Alex Sherlock's father, and because he was a Catholic, and because I thought, you know, the priest that I was talking to told me I could talk to him, and he had been the head of the highway patrol, and he said, well, your phone is tapped. And then he told me all these other things that he found out for me.
Yeah.
And they stole letters out of my apartment. They published them in the paper. There was this headline with my picture. My mother and father never thought it was going to be that way. And it says, Peace Corps aiding communist revolution.
I
And
can
it was
relate
because
to
I was
that.
writing to the Peace Corps about recruiting a lot in the South because I thought it would do people good. And that was the letter that they stole. Well, they stole two others. They published the letters, they published my picture, this headline. We started getting postcards and saying, you know, feel so sorry for you, blank, blank, blank,
Right.
and everything. And they threatened to kill me. I moved out of the apartment because that's where they'd stolen the letters and everything. I moved back to my parents' house. We were checking around the shrubs. That's when they were putting bombs around. Every morning, real early, we were getting up and checking the shrubs, and at night. And I said the best thing is for me to leave. And I was in touch with Evelyn Monsky at the time, and I was going to go to Boston. But then I got a call from Columbia, and they asked me to go and take another teaching position at a university there, which is what I was doing in the Peace Corps. And so I did. I did that. You ever heard from Evelyn?
No, and in fact, I'm trying to think. I think that I last saw you in 1980,
Wow.
and I think that in 1979 was my 20th high school reunion, and I went, and Evelyn was not there, and I was talking to a woman who married Sam Camp. Does that sound right? Anyway, and she said she guessed Evelyn had never married, and that she probably felt funny coming back to her reunion.
Then should I have felt funny going back to the Maxwell reunion? I was the only one there who had never married, I guess.
Well, I think the Maxwell reunion and the Sydney Lanier High School reunion are two different things.
Yeah.
Much so. And
I would go back to the Lanier reunion if I had a chance. I wouldn't have any problem with doing that.
have you ever heard from Lanier about reunions?
No,
See,
never.
I
ever.
started writing after about 15 years or something. I started writing to Lanier from time to time saying, are there any plans for a 20th reunion?
Uh-huh.
And finally, I got a letter that had clearly been sent out 6 months before. It said, okay, you have just enough time to lose 20 pounds and start those hair implants, you know. and it had a list of all the people who were coming and stuff like that. And we had, what, a week's notice?
Mm-hmm.
And I just went. I went by myself. We didn't have enough time for Steve to come over, and because he just could take care of the kids. And that was where I went, and I ran into a lot of people. And I went there without having a chance to look at my yearbook. So I really.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was bad.
Oh, that's basic.
Because people
Should
were
have
saying,
packed it.
Yeah.
well, I couldn't find it. It
I
turned
mean,
out-
us in later
Could
hoses.
be.
Your mother and father's later hoses.
That's right. So I went unprepared, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I could have, but it was still very interesting.
Talk about unprepared. Now that's one of the great regrets I have in life.
Yeah,
That night that I wore your father's lederhosen,
yeah.
and you wore your mother's peasant dress
Right.
or something, and we went as, Germans. God.
Wir
We
sind
should
Freunde
have
hier,
a
wir können.
Volkswagen, and sang Beethoven or something, Ode to Joy. Anyway,
Right.
there we were, little, brooms on our hats and everything, and I was supposed to be master of ceremonies. That was the French club. That was the Mardi Gras.
Right, right.
I hadn't prepared anything. I hadn't prepared a joke. I just assumed that I could do it. And then Tony Tennell says to me, "My parents are here with Minnie Pearl." So I said, "Well, we should call up Minnie Pearl." And I didn't know what to say to her or anything. And there she was with her, with her hat or without her hat. I don't know if she put on the hat. Poor lady. Now she's had a stroke. She's paralyzed.
Yeah.
She's doing all right. And but she was such a nice lady,
Yeah.
and I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know how to handle the whole thing. I did not prepare.
You were 17.
But wouldn't somebody else, ask somebody, "Hey, do you know a few jokes for an MC?" And, I didn't do anything. I just kind of, "Oh yeah, right." They hand me the mic, and I start doing it. And I did my usual gross thing.
Well, but that happened at the reunion, too, at the Maxwell Bass Reunion Kids in 1980.
When you saved my neck.
Oh.
Oh, did you
Anytime.
save my neck?
Anytime.
We were doing a toast, and I'm naming all of the spice there. Every spouse got named except Donnie Yules,
And that was
they
because
had organized it.
And that was because she was such a drag.
I didn't even notice her. As I went around the table, she wasn't there,
That's right.
and you said you forgot
Right.
blank blank,
Right.
whoever, whatever she. And I said, "That's because she deserves a special toast by herself." But if Ann hadn't said that, I would have been the horse's ass as usual.
But they turned to you with no preparation, and they said, "Would you please make the presentation to
Of
Donnie
course.
Newell?"
Of course.
And you did.
Of course. I was in the name of the sun and the moon and the stars.
That's right. That's right. And yeah. Now those reunions have gone on. Well, we were talking about that on the phone.
And you've been back.
No, I didn't go to any more
I thought you'd gone
My
to
brother's
another.
gone to
Oh, I see.
because it's his age group. And
Oh,
younger.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote to Donnie, and I've never heard back from him. Wondering if he.